Yes, man, the man in the wilderness, the renegade when afraid. I am here with our talk with the future Prime Minister of Jamaica, none other but Mark J. Golding. How are you doing, Mr. Golding?
I'm good. Very happy to be here with you, Wayne. Blessings to you and to all of the audience who are listening. Yeah, man.
Yes, man. Yes, man. Because people are saying, them will want to see you back and art talk with me.
Yes.
So, when we have said things, we set it straight, and then say, Lonesome, you talk straight all the time, You understand? Yeah. I'm gonna move to the first question. The first question, because we're not keep up the time, we have a lot of questions to ask, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So the first question, me just scribble it out, right?
Yeah.
When you get elected in the next general election, not if when you get elected in the next general election as the Prime Minister, right? Your government get elected. What is the first priorities? Yeah, for put Jamaica back on track, for make all the Jamaican feel like Jamaican again.
Yeah, we're working out our 100-day plan at the moment. We haven't finalized it yet, but we realize it's very important that you hit the ground running, and so the areas that I've identified, first of all, there's a whole question of governance and integrity in governance. And we want to make sure that we set the tone from the start, that we are very resolute about those issues, because we've gone through 7 years where it's been one scandal after the next. And people's trust and confidence in the system and in the government has been really weakened as a result of all of these episodes of corruption that have come from Petra Jam to CMU to, so many things. So first of all, it is to set the right tone in government in terms of how we operate. And that is really my responsibility as a leader to deal with that. Secondly, we have to look at the whole education system and the training system of the country and start to move quickly to deal with the real weaknesses in the education system that exists now, where we have such high percentages of our primary school children leaving primary school, entering secondary without the basics. And that's a recipe for disaster for them and for the society. So we have to really start the ball rolling in terms of coming to grips with that problem. And it starts even before primary, because pre-primary as well. So we want to start looking at nutrition, both at the primary and pre-primary level, to make sure that children are adequately fed and they can, so they can feel relaxed and comfortable when they're in a learning environment. So these are some of the things we're looking at early. Then the crime and violence side of it is very important as well. There's some legislation that we have designed. We need to get it drafted and passed into law once we come into government, really to allow serious action against those who are fomenting the violence at a high level, rather than this net fishing approach where, the state of emergency type thing where you end up detaining thousands of youths and they don't have due process, and they're there, and many of them never get charged. The vast majority of them are never charged for anything. They're just eventually released, have been incarcerated for whatever long, sometimes over a year it has been since this government took office. So we need to really change the tone around being very serious around the crime and violence issue, making sure the police have the right tools, and we want to also step up the whole the size of the force, because right now the force is undermanned. The legal level of police officers that is permitted, we haven't even got up to that level, despite crime and violence being one of the number one, if not the most critical issue in the country. So we really want to step up the whole process of getting necessary recruitment into the force, giving the force the legal tools they need, and then we want to reintroduce on a national scale some of the social programs to give the youth a new start. Those who are on the wrong path, give them an opportunity to redirect to the right path, through training opportunities, remedial education if they need it, mentorship, and training for life skills and readiness for work. So things like the PMI, where we have people on the ground who are there listening and hearing what is going on. They know the people, they're respected in their community. And when a situation arises, they can jump on it early, try to bring the people them together and say, all right, that happened, make we done it now, and don't make it go any further. those kind of interventions are very important because they can reduce the level of reprisals in the community. So these are some of the things we want to really jump on when we come in.
Okay. All right. So the next question, you see, this present Andrew Holness-led government is a corruptive, destructive, very corrupt, destructive, arrogant, just PR, no substance government. Will your government be honest with the people, work with the people, for a better Jamaica?
That is really the only reason why I am in public affairs. I don't need to do it for any other reason than to serve the people to the best of my ability. I've had a career in law and in business, and it has where I've built a good reputation in the business community, in the legal fraternity, as somebody who's competent and somebody whose word can be relied on. And certainly in the government I will lead, that's what we expect, that the people will be able to rely on what we say, that we're not just saying things for the PR effect or to trick anybody or anything of that nature. We want to be credible. We want to be trustworthy for the people. So that is the essence of what I think governance with integrity is vital right now. And so that is something that will be very much our mantra. That's what we want to live by in government.
Okay, so we can only by account. And the third one now, go back to Andrew Holness and his led administration, because it don't care for poor people. You understand? And it demonstrated by the pandemic when they charge poor people don't have them, can't even find food, 200,000 for a mask. And it turned around that the ministers can come and post up. More than one minister, them transfer police because of one, that a Warmington. The other one say, shower labor rights. You have to, what your party, what your government would do to hold minister accountable, because this government don't love poor people. It don't go claim say it loves poor people, but it throw them under the bus and the way them angle them. Yes. Yeah. But your government would do different.
Well, first of all, I was very concerned when they used the Disaster Risk Management Act as the principal tool for dealing with the pandemic, and they gave the Prime Minister the power by an order that he signs without parliamentary approval to create offenses that people could be charged for and relatively high levels of fines. I pointed it out in Parliament that this was wrong, and they wouldn't listen to what I had to say. And as a result, we saw situations where for relatively minor things like not being, in your house, during the curfew, you might be outside at your gate, whatever it is, people end up being fined large amounts of money, $200,000 and those kind of figures, which was totally disproportionate and inappropriate. So similarly with the way in which the housing situation in Clifton was dealt with, where the Prime Ministers come to Parliament and say, well, some gangsters have been selling land out there, government land, and we're going to go and bulldoze the houses. And it went in and bulldozed the houses, and those are vulnerable people who may have been scammed, but they had bought the property they thought legitimately. And in any event, no alternative accommodation was put in place for them. And so these are single mothers with children going to school, and you just go lick down their house. And it's only after the pressure reached the government over it, because of the widespread anger that it caused in the society, that they picked out one of the ladies who was a victim and did something for her. They're very good at those kind of gimmicks after the event to try and restore their public image. But a PNP government under my leadership will not be doing things that oppress the people in that. We don't believe in that. We want to uplift people. And in particular, Jamaica has many people who are living on land where they don't have a title for it. And they're in what we call informal settlements without proper infrastructure. And we intend to focus on that and to try and uplift those people by having a program where they can form themselves into an organization to manage their community. And we will help them with the infrastructure and give them very soft terms to pay back for that. And they will get a title to their lot, and they will be able to build. And we have done this before in the 90s, and some of those schemes were not finished. and are still remain unfinished. And I'm committed to us finishing those and dealing with this problem, which is a national problem as well. So overall, I would say to you that, when we say power to the people, it is not just empty words. We believe in empowering the masses of the people. That is why the PNP exists. That is why we did things like establish the National Housing Trust, why we established a National Health Fund, the Chase Fund, the Drugs for the Elderly program, the PATH program. These are all PNP programs that still exist today because and are helping people who are vulnerable. And there are many others. I've just named a few. Our entire orientation has been about uplifting and empowering the masses of people who came out of the colonial experience with very little other than centuries of oppression, and giving them an opportunity through an active state intervention to build institutions to support them so they can move forward in life. And that is why Jamaica has made significant progress, because those institutions have achieved that for many people. That is our orientation as a party, and it's really why we exist. So I don't think the people have to fear anything about the way in which we would operate in terms of how we deal with people. We intend to deal with people in an honest way, but in a caring way, because we are a party that is about caring for the people who need care.
Okay. All right. With national security now, right? We noticed the police, the Prime Minister set a tone, and the police, the Commissioner of Police, to me and to a lot of people in the diaspora and in Jamaica, it seems that police more politically aligned more than anything else. The Prime Minister make an order. I want to ask you something. Is this the way it's supposed to be, that a Prime Minister, the police was supposed to be independent of the Prime Minister?
Absolutely.
Now, so why when the Prime Minister says something, the police get up and, this current the police head, act when the Prime Minister tell them to act and doing all these things under your leadership? You're going to change that completely, right?
Yes. The law, which was amended in the 1990s by us, sets out that operational autonomy, operational control vests in the police themselves, headed by the Commissioner. And the role of the government through the Ministry of National Security is to set broad policy around, for example, are we going to focus on building out the police force? What tools do they need? Where are the areas where there's a need for greater emphasis from a policy perspective? What legislation is required to support effective policing? That is the role of the government. The role of the government is not to tell the Commissioner, this community forget pressure, or this individual forget pressure, or anything like that. That is corruption. And of course, it doesn't come out in broad daylight, but when you see manifestations of bias in some of the ways in which cases are handled, you have to, be very concerned about it. So I think it's very important that we apply the principle that exists in the Constabulary Force Act, which is to say that operational autonomy is with the police. And then you have the institutions in place to ensure that if the police act excessively now, they're accountable. And that is why you have an INDECOM, for example. But there needs to be a balance and due process there as well, so that the relationship with the police and their regulator, so to speak, is an effective one, a cohesive one, where there's mutual respect, there's due process, so that somebody doesn't have to fear that if they conduct themselves properly, they are exposed. No. But sometimes we know that things may go too far, and then the citizen needs to be protected there as well. I've also said, for example, that the public defender ought to have the ability to bring proceedings in court. Right now, we have a public defender that can't bring a lawsuit, can't bring a law case to vindicate the rights of the citizens. We want to establish that they have that power so that they can take up issues like if somebody is being oppressed by not being allowed to attend school because them have locks, or having themselves trimmed in a police station as a young lady, or whatever it may be, where the state has abused the rights of the citizens. There must be recourse for them. I want to introduce legal aid for civil matters, not just criminal matters. Right now, the legal aid system in Jamaica is for criminal matters, which is important and good, so that anybody who's facing a criminal charge can have legal representation. But there are many, many important issues in life which are not criminal, but are civil: land disputes, personal injury situations, abuse by the state where you want to see constitutional redress, we need to have a civil legal aid system so that people can have that kind of support to protect themselves if they need to go to court, to protect their rights. So these are some of the things that I am focused on. And in terms of the police must be professional, but they must be allowed to do their job. And the guidance of the minister must be one of policy, direction, and hearing reports from them and making sure that they're performing as they should. And that is really how we operated when we were last in government. There were no queries about police abuse or politicization of police decision making. Nobody was talking about those things when we were in government, because that's not how we operate. We respected the line between policy versus operational decision making, and it's a very important line.
Okay, all right. Going to the education ministry now, because we see teacher leaving in droves. Just January last year to August is nearly 2,500, 2,400 and something teacher leave the profession, resign because of all the government angling them. And if you have so much teacher leaving in a drove, Jamaica, that spelled trouble for Jamaica. What your government would do different to keep on these teachers, because it's bad for Jamaica right now.
Very bad. Very bad. I mean, it's a crisis in the education system to have experienced teachers leaving, and to the extent that they're replaced, it's often by just newly graduated teachers who have no experience in the classroom. And so you're really weakening the level of teaching in the classroom as a result of this problem. So first of all, we need to have a good relationship with the teachers and their union. And that has to be based on a listening ear and a respectful dialogue. A lot of damage was done with this public sector transformation, compensation transformation exercise, with how the teachers were handled, where they had concerns about what was on the table, and they were being pressured by the minister to agree to what the offer that was being made, even if they weren't happy with it. They were being pressured to accept it, and they were being told, if you did not accept it by the end of March, your retroactive, which was a substantial amount going back to the beginning of 2022, your retroactive would be deferred and payment would be at some future date, which he wasn't in a position to even say when that was. So those pressures were brought to bear, and when they eventually signed off, many of them didn't feel that they were properly looked after. So that the 20% over 3 years, which was really the sort of standard in the other, not the ones at the very top who did better, and the ones at the very bottom in the public sector who did percentage-wise did better. But many public servants in the middle, teachers and police officers and so on, didn't get the level of increase that they were hoping for. And so the combination of the outcome of that process and the way that process was handled, I think, has turned off a lot of teachers and made them want to look elsewhere. So we have to rebuild those relationships with the teachers. We are going to have to look at how we can adjust their compensation upwards to make them feel more comfortable. Obviously, operating within the available resources of the government to do that. But it must be a priority, because I have said, education and training will be the priority of the next PNP government. And that means from early childhood, as I've said already, and primary, to fix those problems. We want to create a situation where Jamaica has the best early childhood and primary school system in the region. We want to, because that is where you start the children off. And if they get the right start, things tend to fall into place later on. It's when they don't get the right start that they're struggling all the way through the system. And many of them end up with nothing to show for it. And are, those are the ones who end up getting into problems in terms of behavior and badness and so on. So we really need to focus on the education system, and making sure that our teachers are comfortable and feel that they are valued is a critical part of that.
Yes. All right. So after that, with the youth, will you bring back in full force youth service and community centers and things like that? Would your government will come back with all these things? Youth service and community centers and things like that?
We believe that there needs to be a national program to deal with youths who are at risk in particular. So we had a thing called Unite for Change when we were last in government, which was really a program that focused on youth at risk and brought the broader society stakeholders together to provide support for initiatives to get them moving in the right direction, training, mentorship, and so on. And obviously the assets within the community centers are a critical part of that, because those, the youth must be able to stay in their community and use those facilities to get ahead in terms of their own lives. So we believe that what is happening now, where the private sector have initiated Project STAR, which is really similar to Unite for Change, but is being driven by the private sector, and they've identified a few communities and they're trying hard to make a difference. And I applaud them for that effort, and I applaud Keith Duncan for leading that. But and I support it. But we need to make that a national effort, because there are communities all across Jamaica, not just in Kingston and St. Andrew and Montego Bay. There are communities all across Jamaica where we have youths at risk who need to have a second chance. And we need to put programs in place where they can get training, where they can get mentorship, when they can get life skills coaching, where they can get readiness for work coaching, and move them into the system so they can become productive citizens, rather than leaving them and they're part of the problem and we expect the police to deal with them. No, that can't be right. We can't build a society like that. That is why we have this high level of crime and violence. And no care how many people get taken out one way or another, it just continues and continues, because the system is generating each generation year after year, because we're not fixing the causes of it. So we have to focus on the causes of it and try and find solutions to that. And it must be focused on young people, empowering young people, using the community development processes, strengthening the SDC, the Social Development Commission, strengthening the parish development committees and basically the local government system within communities that can have the resources to make a difference on the ground by these kind of things that we're discussing, training opportunities and so on. So this is very much part of our philosophy, coming out of it. Norman Manley started it with Jamaica Welfare, which became the SDC, the Social Development Commission. Michael Mann in the 70s practiced it extensively, as you know, and we think there's an important role for that in trying to uplift the young people and give them a chance. Some of them have been able to navigate all the challenges in the system and end up getting into college or university, and they're on a path to some, good job, hopefully, to the extent that the economy can generate jobs for them. But others are going to need kind of attention that we're discussing so that we can give them a second chance in life.
Okay, good. All right, the next thing now. We're going to healthcare now, because this really troublesome. Because, the current government did promise, and most of the time them do PR. The health minister do a lot of PR, market me. Yeah, in my market something 85 million where, people have dirt to eat, them don't have no food. Me talk straight, right?
Yeah.
What your government will do different for healthcare, because I notice you have one hospital, the government leave from couple hundred million to 3 billion to 5 billion to 10, gone to 14.1 that are the Corner Regional Hospital. People buying cardboard for lion for $500. People dropping off a chair. Them don't have no medication. Them don't have no CT scan. Them don't have nothing but them say them spend thousands billions of dollars. And them sourcing out to them private friend what your administration will do different. Because people are suffering now.
Very much so.
But people really have suffered through the healthcare system. No dialysis machine, them barely can go through. So it's like when you're sick, it's like you're signing it's just a death warrant for you.
Yeah.
What your administration going to do to rescue all these people who cannot afford these healthcare? Because it's a sin. It's a sin.
It's a very serious issue. What has happened at Cornwall Regional Hospital is really scandalous, where a project that was costed originally at a modest figure to renovate the hospital has ballooned and ballooned. The time frame for executing the project has been extended and extended, and now it's 14 billion plus and it still don't finish yet. And the people of Western Jamaica have been without that facility operating at its normal level of service delivery for 6 years now, I think. It's an absolutely scandalous situation. We believe in, first of all, improving primary health care so that most people can get treatment without having to end up in hospital if you have a strong primary health system where you really make sure that the clinics are properly resourced and manned, and so that persons who need some health care, unless it's a very serious situation, they can go to their local clinic and get what they need done. And that also lends itself to a more efficient use of resources and brings health closer to the people. We see the need for example, a stroke center in Jamaica, because there are now procedures where persons, if they get speedy treatment for stroke, they can be restored to full functionality very quickly. And we know stroke is a real problem in Jamaica because of the legacy of the kind of nutrition that was given to our people in slavery days, and the hypertension and diabetes that are very high levels here. And so we have a problem with stroke. And we need to have a center where persons can be taken quickly if they're suffering from stroke, because if you can treat them within a reasonable quick period of time, you can actually avoid the kind of problems that result if you don't, which severe disability of one sort or another, speech and mobility. So these are some of the things that we'd like to see done. And then of course, just looking at how the patients are treated when they enter the health system, and the kind of situations where we don't spend enough attention on things like maintaining the equipment that we have. So you'll often find that basic pieces of equipment are not there, and people can't have access to, whether it be diagnostic equipment like CT scans and so on, or air conditioning units in theater. So the operating theaters are not operating as constantly as they should be. So you have a backlog of patients needing elective surgeries, and those patients are suffering. We really need to focus on getting the basics right. And, as you've said, the current minister, really his strength is in marketing. And, so he's marketing himself and he's very successful at doing that. I'm not taking anything from him, but the truth
is a PR person, yes.
The truth is that the system needs care and attention to the basics of what happens when a patient gets to hospital. How quickly are they looked at? How quickly are they assessed? And then how are they treated? In pending being, if they're going to be admitted and given a bed. Because we have situations, as we know, where people have to be lying on benches, sitting in chairs for days at a time, because there's nothing available for them. We need to sort those things out and get them fixed. And, so we are committed to getting the basics done right. So the experience that a person has when they interface with the healthcare system is a positive experience. And, that may take some additional resources as well. But health and education are very, very critical things for the nation. And so we have to make sure that we're doing the things, prioritizing the things that really matter to the people.
Yes. I notice you're a responsible opposition, because I noticed a few years ago when you have some outbreak with mosquito, like how you have dengue now, and I see the prime minister now, the government now, they're in opposition, them run out and them cast all kind of things, and them say they can manage this. But them have an outbreak now with dengue.
Yeah, very much so.
And I notice you are more, on a professional level. You don't come out with this boisterous talking and talk down and do it very dangerous. And them have an outbreak and dengue right now.
They do.
Them did have the dead baby, and I don't hear you come out, you don't even,
we have a health spokesman, Dr. Maurice Guy, and he issued a release on it over the weekend, pointing out that the necessary steps to address the mosquito infestation were not put in place early, so that we're dealing with the situation when the horse has already bolted. and the dengue is now raging in several parishes, including Kingston and St. Andrew. So that is really a question of poor management of the situation, where they should have taken the necessary steps, especially when we were in a drought situation. They could have taken steps to say, when the rains come, we have clear drains, we have, had the PR, public relations information out there, so people are very attentive to things like old tires or containers or mosquitoes can breed, and they're making sure that those things aren't there in their yards or or in their communities and so on. So yes, I mean, we are a responsible opposition, and we try not to just play politics with everything, So yes, we're in a competitive political environment, and so we have to show that we are attentive to the needs of the people and defend their rights. But we're not seeking to just score points for the sake of it. And when the nation is really looking for leadership that can deal with the problems that the people have. And that requires a certain sense of responsibility and, proper analysis of the problem and holding the government to account. This dengue situation, is one which could have been avoided if the mosquito eradication or mosquito management steps had been taken early, which is what should have happened. And because they weren't done effectively, they're now trying to do them now. They're talking about fogging schedules now. And, when we're already in an epidemic with dengue. So, I would just repeat the call of our Shadow Minister of Health to all Jamaicans that when the Ministry of Health personnel come to do their inspections, let them come in, cooperate with them so they can see where you maybe not have overlooked situations where mosquitoes are in your community and are breeding and so on. We need to manage those situations as best we can, but we're late in the day because the thing wasn't properly managed when we had the opportunity to manage it, which was early in the situation before it got out of hand.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next thing now, the farmers, they are suffering, crying out in silence, because we see an article the other day where some farmer talking about the land, back in the days of Michael Mandela land lease. But what them doing right now, this government, present government, them go and them raise up some money on the farmers, right? Them are discourage our farmers in Jamaica because them import more things than anything else, and that put burden on the dollar, you understand, and put burden on the country. And then it take away works. So the farmer, them said no, them raise up some lease to like $8,000 an acre. Plus them have to buy water, plus them have to pay people, so them can everything that's cracking down. What your government going to do different? Because I in my estimation, I think them should give the farmer something cheaper than that. Encourage them because them create more jobs and everything. What's your take on what your government going to do, to cushion this and then bring back farmer, because we promote and we support eat what we grow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And grow what we eat. I agree with that. We consider, when you look at the economy of Jamaica, we don't have a very balanced economy. We don't have a very resilient economy because we're very dependent, for example, on tourism, which is vulnerable to external shocks and internal shocks. And what the pandemic showed is that you can't just rely on the international supply chain as being there for you in your time of need. You need to have your house in order and be able to defend yourself and protect your people. And food is an essential aspect of that. And that is why the whole idea of growing what you eat is critical, and eating what you grow. Now, so we see agriculture as a critical part of the economy and rural development as a critical part of the development of the society. Because poverty in the rural areas is deeper than it is in the urban areas. So we need to encourage farmers, encourage agriculture, and encourage rural development. And that means supporting the farmers with the necessary inputs that will allow them to produce. For example, we're looking at things like storage facilities, farm roads. I was listening to something today where coffee farmers in Portland are bawling that the farm roads are all blocked and they can't get to their farms to get out their coffee. So these are basic things that need to be prioritized so that farmers can be productive. And where you're talking about public lands now, We have so much idle land in the country now. When you drive through Jamaica, you see so much idle land. And some of it is crown land, government land. Why? And then the government not earning nothing from it. If a man or a woman is going to put it into production and produce food to feed their families and to feed the nation and even maybe for export, why would you want to make it costly for them to use that land? They are the ones who are going to turn that land into something valuable for the society. So they must be given a very nurturing approach. So, I mean, I don't know the specifics that you're referring to about the lease rates and so on, but in principle, we would want to make it as affordable as possible for farmers to lawfully put public lands into production and give them the necessary support systems so that they can be effective in growing their crops and raising their animals. So that is really the approach that I would prefer to take. I want to encourage the transfer of technology between larger farms, well-capitalized farms, and smaller farms. We want to create incentives for those relationships, like has happened, for example, in the chicken industry, where we have Jamaica broilers and Caribbean broilers who are integrated with small farmers who grow for them. And they provide them with the inputs, they provide them with the chicks, they provide them with the working capital, and they are the off-takers. They're the ones who buy from them, and then they process them for sale in the market. And there's thousands and thousands of Jamaicans who make a living off of the chicken industry. We need to try and encourage those kind of nurturing relationships to transfer best practices and technology to our farmers so they can raise their productivity and grow wealth for themselves and their families as well.
Yes.
And there's also the issue of linkages, Wayne, where we had started the process of trying to deepen the linkages between our agricultural industry and our tourism industry in particular. When we got as Minister of Tourism, we set up the linkages committee, which is basically looking at trying to establish those relationships between farmers and hotels so that we can have more local sales rather than importing everything for the tourism industry. We can be using as much as possible locally produced food for the tourists, and that would mean more of the foreign dollars staying in our country, because right now the retention of foreign exchange in the tourism industry is much too low. Most of it stays outside the country, especially since most of it is owned by foreigners now, the larger hotels anyway. So we need to fully support that process of linkages and continue the work that has been done, because that's another important source of business for our farmers as well, because a big market, the hotel market.
Speaking of hotel market, Sir Joshua Manley, back then in the 70s, him did come with some legislation or something that, non-Jamaican that owning majority of your land or own your land. But as it gone back to more foreigner in foreign hands, right? And Jamaican can get for own a piece of the rock. What will your government do to reverse some of this? Because most Jamaicans don't own nothing.
Well, we have some 700,000. I mean, that's an estimate, but I've heard that figure quoted often, of persons who are in informal settlements. So they're on lands that they don't own, and they may have tried to build a little home house for themselves. But by doing that, they're investing all of their resources in a situation where they don't own the property. So they can never use it to get a loan, whether it be for healthcare or education or for business or for expanding their home further. So we really need to focus on this issue of improving the land tenure of the people. And that is something that the PNP is committed to. And whether we do it, there's a legislative program that we have in mind to support that, to make it easier for persons to acquire those titles. And then the state needs to get behind those communities and put in place the necessary systems and procedures to help the residents to regularize their tenure, become titled, and build good communities where, they can enjoy a good quality of life. In terms of the larger properties and so on the North Coast and the tourism industry, my view is that what we want to encourage is investors who will see an investment in Jamaica as not just an opportunity to make profits to be exported back to where they come from, but where they want to make a positive difference in the local society and communities where they are, and encourage them to see the need for bringing the tourism product to a place where it is not just an enclave system, meaning a system where the tourist comes here and every dollar that they spend is within that hotel. Or if they're on a tour, it's a tour organized by that hotel. Where we want to have a situation where they encourage their tourists to enjoy what Jamaica has to offer and to go and patronize the local business people, whether it be the craft vendors, whether it be the rafters, whether it be the water sports operators, whether it be the restaurateurs and so on, the jellyman, the soup man, etc. That experience needs to be promoted. And, so our model of tourism has really not been one which ensures that the widest and deepest flow of benefits to the broader society is assured. It is much too concentrated around this enclave system. And so I want to see how we can work with the hotels to have a different approach going forward, where we're seeking to expand and allow more interaction and more integration into the local economy by the hotel operators, so that our industry really works for Jamaica as much as possible.
Okay. And next thing, we have a next problem with the beaches in Jamaica and the rivers.
Yeah.
But the government continue, selling these land and, and these foreigners, getting the beaches. And it's wrong. No country selling beaches. I am here. I can just go to the beach, the hotel, one of the middle of the place and everything. You can't stop me from the beach. If you ever invasion of Jamaica, we don't even know what these hotel people, we don't know what them up to. Jamaica tag right now as a destination, as a transport for drugs. So we don't know what them up to. So I think the beach is supposed to be clear when them have investors coming for land, and our people supposed to can use the beaches. What your government going to do about that? Because it cannot happen. Just continue like this. You're taking away the beach like a landlock for the people of Jamaica. It cannot work.
It cannot work. It is really a very bad system, and it has just become worse and worse as our investment in hotels has expanded and more properties are coming under private ownership for this type of enclave tourism that I was talking about. Now, first of all, we would want to put in place a measure that any new projects must include public access to their beach as part of the terms of the investment. So that we're drawing a line to say, going forward, we're not going to allow enclaves that don't allow public access to the beach. It can be done in a way which doesn't affect the hotel product, because we understand that them have them restaurants and them bar and so on, and and it's something maybe all inclusive, so there's no money being collected there and they need to manage the property. But they must be able to allow access to the beach from the road over their property, in a reasonable way that protects their interests and the public's interests. Then, as regards the existing properties now, the Beach Control Act has a section in it that allows the Beach Control Authority to acquire a compulsory easement over the private land that to assure public access to a beach. That already exists in the law, but it is not being used. And we would be looking to invoke those provisions so as to create rights of access to in all of the major resort areas, so that the people can have access to the beach. Because it's not that they own the beach, Wayne, they don't own the beach, because between the high water mark and the low water mark is public land. Anybody's allowed to go on that. But the problem is access, because they own the land between the road and the beach now. So you can't get to the beach other than by going over their property, and they don't allow you to go over their property. So that is where you get the exclusion. So we need to invoke the law so that we create an opportunity for our people to have access to the beach. And we need to do it in a way which is sensitive to their business as well. I don't want to send a signal as if we're going to do anything that would be totally disruptive of the tourism industry. No, I think it can be done in a much more reasonable and cooperative way, but we are very resolute that we have to create rights of access where the public can get access to our beaches. In Barbados, for example, the Bayesian people can go on any beach.
That's true.
We have this problem.
Here.
And they have a flourishing tourism, high-end tourism industry. There's no reason why Jamaica has to follow this development model where we exclude our own people from the beach. We need to fix that. And in fact, I'm in dialogue with Jabem, Mr. Devon Taylor and his team, and Marcus Goff. And I want to big up Marcus as a Rastafari lawyer who has been taking some of these matters to court to defend the rights of the people. And I think it's very important. That is why we need a public defender who can support those kind of cases and can, rather than relying on the goodwill of private lawyers to do it. So, I am very much on board with trying to solve this problem, but doing so in a way where we say, all right, let's look at the principle of the thing. Let's look at what the Jamaican society needs, how we build a more inclusive society, a society where everybody feels like they're somebody. And we are living on an island. We must have access to beaches. You can't be excluding the people from beaches. So how do we deal with that? And we talk it through and we negotiate and we use the law as a tool to make sure we get the results we need. And that is how we would approach it.
Yes. All right. Just leave from the beaches and me just go back to I go back to the ganja now, the good old ganja. Yes. Because I noticed, I think I don't want to draft up something there for the ganja, the past that. But I noticed the government came in after and then take all these license and pass it on, put themselves on the boards and pass on license to them colleagues. But the man them who suffer for these ganja, for growing ganja, the real people, them cannot afford license. Right. I think the government should do something different where you could go flat. And you could develop up if you're going to do the island thing and sell tourists or anything at all. The government could do that. What your government would do different. Yeah. Finance and bring these people in that them can benefit from these ganja, from the ganja. Because I remember people used to get locked up and go to prison for ganja,
Yes. And they still are in some circumstances. They still are. What I did was design a law in 2015. Well, it was passed in 2015, which first of all decriminalized personal use of ganja. So for a small 2 ounces or less, possession or smoking, it's not a prosecutable offense, and you couldn't get a criminal record for it. And in fact, we introduced that automatic expungement procedure so that anybody who had a past conviction for personal use, smoking or possession of small quantities, if they could get their record cleaned by just applying for a record, and they didn't have to go through the whole process normally of expungement. It would just be cleaned up for them automatically and they would get a clean certificate. We did that. We also established a new industry for medicinal and therapeutic ganja, which is a regulated industry because, of course, we are operating in an international environment, and the treaties that Jamaica signed on to, as well as many, many other countries, treats marijuana or ganja in a particular way. So we navigated those treaties and said, all right, we can create a lawful industry in medicinal and therapeutic ganja. But what went wrong was we lost the election when we had just started the process. And our philosophy around it was to be as inclusive as possible for small farmers. We were going to waive their license fees for small farmers to get them into the system. And but what has happened is that the rules of the game that have been set are very difficult for the operators in the industry to comply with. And we need to look at them again and say, what is it that we can do to make it as an inclusive an industry as possible? I would like to see a situation where, first of all, the Rastafari community need their own economic ecosystem, because their relationship with the herb is different to the rest, because for them it's a sacrament. So they have special rights and relationships with the herb, and that must be respected. And the law we passed creates an opportunity for that. The Minister of Justice can make regulations to create that ecosystem for them. He has not done so. I established the Rastafari Advisory Council when I was Minister of Justice, with each mansion being represented on it, to advise me on issues to do with ganja and the Rastafari community. He has abandoned that council. So the whole thing has gone off the rails and needs to be put back on a progressive footing. And we intend to do that. Wayne.
Yes, that well. And next thing now, this is our next big one. Impeachment. Because right now, all this present government run them lie. I see the liest man on the face of this earth. I talk straight, Andrew Onis. Him tell lie when I'm sleep, him tell lie in a parliament, him tell lie when him wake, him just get up and tell lie. Right? We have to have impeachment laws pass. Too much arrogance and too much finger smith. It cannot be business as usual with this kind of, arrogant government.
That's
what
right.
are you going to do different? Because we have to have impeachment laws. And people have to get all accountable. And start a prison too. Yeah.
I agree. The irony of it is that Bruce Golding had brought an impeachment bill to Parliament when he was Prime Minister, but they never passed it. The JLP in their 2016 manifesto said they would pass it within the first 100 days. They've not done anything about it since. That was just talk. When the George Wright thing happened, where he was on video beating up a woman in a parking lot with a stool, and he has never denied that it was him. I said to myself, well, how do we as parliamentarians deal with this? And I looked at the impeachment bill that had been developed by Bruce Golding, and I did some work on it. So it would address a situation like that. Not necessarily identical to that, but a situation where somebody as a parliamentarian is behaving in a manner that brings that office into disrepute. And then a procedure for impeachment can follow. I tabled that bill 2 years ago in the Parliament, and I asked them to send it to a joint select committee so that the wider society can look at it and we can set it and make sure it is what it should be and pass it into law. They have not allowed it to move one step further since they have been in office. And I'm committed to it. It's a constitutional amendment, and it would establish within the Constitution an impeachment procedure for parliamentarians who behave in a manner that is inconsistent with and in violation of the norms of behavior for somebody in the People's Parliament. I also think that we need to look at recall, and this recall is a system where voters, having voted somebody in, if they're unhappy with the level of representation, if enough of them are unhappy, they can initiate a process where that person can ultimately be recalled and the seat is vacated. And it exists in some other countries. And I think part of making our parliament more accountable and giving the public a sense that we are not just there to feather our own nest, but we're really trying to be servants of the people. And we, respect accountability and transparency in the name of the people. We need these mechanisms to be put in place so that the people can begin to have more confidence in us. So I would like to see that also developed and put into law. So those are two. Impeachment and recall are two important things. Also, the way in which the committees of parliament function. Right now, what this government has done is they put each of the committees of parliament have 2 or 3 opposition members and 10 to 12 government members. And other than 2 committees, the vast majority of the committees, the government side, appoint the chairman. And the result of that is that these committees, which are supposed to hold government to account in parliament, look at things to do with whatever it may be, the production and the economy, foreign affairs, the health system, and so on. These committees are not functioning in the way they should to hold the government to account, because the government controls the committees, and that can't be right. So we need to look at making those committees more balanced in terms of the representation on the committee, and the opposition should chair them. That principle was established, again, back in Bruce Golding time. And when Portia became Prime Minister, we continued it. We didn't change it. We worked with it. And then when Holness won in 2016, he worked with it. And then in 2020, after he won the election, he abandoned it. And he went back to the government appointing the chairman for most of the committees. And that was not in his manifesto. He never said he was going to do it and tell the people before the election. It's after the election he implemented it. And, we feel that was a very retrograde step. And it's something that needs to be reversed. Because when you talk about constitutional reform, what you really need is to build systems of accountability into the parliamentary process so that the government is kept on their toes and the people are aware of what's going on and know that issues which need to be addressed are being addressed. And these are some of the little things that can be done to make the system work better. So I'm very much in favor of that.
Yes. And next thing now, I've gone over to the DPP now because I have a real problem with the DPP. And Jamaica, people in the diaspora have a real problem with the DPP. Because that DPP, I think Panton was there and in retired back in 2008. And she took up office. And she's supposed to retire from 2020?
Yeah, it was Pantry. Kent Pantry.
Pantry. The Pantry, yes, Pantry. Mm-hmm. She's supposed to retire from 2020. And which government see it fit to keep her on. She don't have nothing. I don't say she accomplished nothing but back in the government. This is total corruption. When you form the next government, will you get a special prosecutor and investigate all of them? Because you want a clean Jamaica now, investigate all corruption and anywhere things lies, you just deal with it right there.
Yeah. Well, we have an institution called the Integrity Commission, which is under attack. And we need to protect it because it has prosecutorial powers, it has investigatory powers, it can receive and share information with other law enforcement agencies, with the tax authorities, with the FID. It is well designed as a system for tackling corruption. But the JLP has been attacking them in Parliament for the most of this year, proposing taking away their prosecutorial powers, proposing that no cases before a certain year should be investigated historically, all of these things. And it's a very bad situation. And when we are in government, we intend to allow the Integrity Commission to do their work without fear or favor, and the chips must lie where they fall. On the DPP matter, I don't want to get into it with you too much because we have brought a lawsuit in the Constitutional Court. It is filed to challenge the legislation that they rammed through in July to extend her retirement age by 5 more years. We feel that was passed for an improper purpose, and the procedures that were built into the Constitution, which gave the Governor General a role in agreeing whether or not there should be an extension, those were not pursued in the right way. And there was no consultation with the opposition, and there was no consultation with the Constitutional Reform Committee, which they set up in January, which is supposed to be looking at constitutional reform. So they went and amended the Constitution with no prior notice and no consultation to extend the retirement age of the DPP. And they threw in the Auditor General as well, just for window dressing, in my opinion, because the Auditor General is nowhere near retirement right now. But the real concern was to keep the current DPP in office for longer. I don't want to get into why they would want to do that. But we don't think the way it was done was right, and we're challenging it in court. And I think we have a date in November for the hearing of that matter. So we'll see what the courts feel about it.
Yeah, because this bad. And next thing again now, we'll just touch over to SSL and the way how them deal with this. Because I
can't stay with you much longer though, Wayne, because
I know. I just
have another Zoom. More. I set up a Zoom because I was told this was 1 hour. So I set up another
1 hour. Going to done now. 1 hour going to done now. So with the SSL, yes. That saga, but the government said they're not going to spend money. Then you have the finance minister came out and him say, we're going to spend money here. Him say, I'm not going to spend money there. No, them start to mismatch. Them don't all know the government or the police or the feds or any one of them don't talk to the owner of SSL. None of these people, them just use one lady for a scapegoat. When you come in as a government, right? If them not care what them do, you're going to look back over all these things for us. You have to look over back, Because we know
we may need a commission of inquiry into the whole
that
SSL.
Is a special one. Special good.
We may need to do that. The truth is that there's some very there's some things about it which are very unsatisfactory. The fact that the Prime Minister himself was an account holder there and withdrew his money before the whole thing became publicly known that there was this massive fraud in there. The circumstances around that need to be looked at. The fact that the finance minister received reports from the regulator and claimed that they were in some cupboard in his office when the situation in there was getting worse and worse, and action needed to be taken to protect the account holders, the investors there, and the wider financial system from the SSL problem. That also needs to be looked at, because I think he was derelict in his responsibilities by not stepping in much earlier. The way in which the whole FSC has been handled, the choice of chairman over time and so on, and the way in which the regulatory powers that they have were deployed or not deployed in relation to SSL needs to be looked at as well. And now, of course, the recent thing where they've decided to, well, they announced that they were going to be paying the wages of the staff that they've kept there using public funds when the institution is in temporary management but is still owned by its original owners. So you're funding a private business with public resources. And then they said, oh no, well, in fact, we're going to be using the asset recovery money, as if that isn't public resources, which of course it is, because it belongs to the public. And it's the Jamaican people money that. And now we're hearing that some insurance proceeds are going to be used. And we need clarity on that as well. You know, what is this insurance money for? Is this insurance money to fund things like staff wages, or is it to indemnify investors who may have suffered losses due to fraud? We don't know. There's a lot going on there. The information is not being transparently delivered to the public. We've been asking questions. My colleague Julian Robinson has been on the case, and he regularly, and every time him says something, it's like them jump around and something more come out. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have a proper review of what happened in SSL. And then whatever comes out of that will then, need to be pursued. But I think, because Usain Bolt, such a prominent Jamaican, probably the best known living Jamaican around the world, was a victim of the fraud in there. And, the public, the international community looking on, and, we need to make sure we get to the bottom of it and that it is not pushed under the carpet or otherwise dealt with in a way that's a little bit shady. So we're going to have to look at that carefully.
All right. Thank you. Well, the people them, so we need a part 2 and then a part 3. Even come back.
We will.
We definitely have to come back. Yeah? Because we just start,
Yeah,
but you have to do and him have to take care.
Well, I mean, you covered a lot of ground. You did very well, Wayne. As you know, we don't know respect you, man. And keep up the good work. Keep up the good work. Yeah, man. God bless you. Yeah?
All right.
All right. One love. Yeah, man. Cool.
One love. Yes, people. So you see we cover a lot of ground. He might come back. I'm going to come back. Yeah? I'm going to cover some other grounds. You understand? Because, this uncaring government now, you have to hold them to account. No two way about it. Them two lie. Them corrupted. The arrogance to kill. And everything around there. So you see right now, we have to hold them to account. No two way about it. I'm here. Later, I'm on. Check it out later, yeah? Yeah, man, later fling pay fire again, you know the man in the wilderness, we don't play. Later. I'm out. Bless.